When I was living in Jerusalem for my first year of rabbinical school, I would practice my Hebrew on service workers, store clerks, bus drivers, waiters, and for the most part, they were patient and forgiving as I stumbled through sentences and butchered verb conjugations. There was a restaurant next to campus where my friends and I would have lunch, and we would take turns conversing with the waiters and paying for our meals in Hebrew. On one afternoon after finishing our meal, I called the waiter over to pay. I asked confidently, "Afshar lekabel et hamivchan bevakasha?" At first, the waiter looked confused, but after a moment, his puzzled complexion turned to amusement. "Mivchan?" he responded. I looked at my friends, who were giggling hysterically. As some of you know, it turns out that instead of asking, "Can I please have the bill?" I had accidentally said, "Can I please have the test?" Embarrassing. After the laughter had died down, the waiter smiled at me. "Ein li mivchan bishvilcha, I don't have a test for you. Aval ha-cheshbon, but the bill, kan, is right here." And he placed a small piece of paper onto the table. Now, I'll admit that my Hebrew remains a work in progress, but I can confirm on this Yom Kippur morning that I have not mixed up mivchan and cheshbon in the years since this interaction. And that, I think, is a good thing, because they are definitely not synonyms. Mivchan, as we now know, means test or exam, the kind that if we aren't currently experiencing, we remember fondly from our school days. But cheshbon, which represents a bill or check in modern Hebrew, can mean something entirely more serious. For the most well-known usage of this word comes from the phrase cheshbon hanefesh, a check of the spirit, an accounting of the soul, a practice we are asked to perform during these days of awe, and specifically on this day, Yom Kippur. And that is this cheshbon, this accounting of the soul, that I want to focus on this morning. The Talmud teaches the concept as follows: "Come and let us take a cheshbono shel olam, an account of the world, the financial loss incurred by the fulfillment of a mitzvah in contrast to its reward, and the profit to be had from committing a sin in contrast to the cost it bears on the soul." In other words, cheshbon hanefesh is the spiritual equivalent of annual financial accounting, an extensive examination of the positives and negatives in our business plan, where we've made a profit, where we've seen losses, where we've built up capital, and where we've depleted it. And this means that every year will look a little bit different, because the ways in which we spend and save our spiritual capital change over time. Some years we may get to the high holy days and be in a spiritual surplus, while other years we may find ourselves deep in the red zone. Unfortunately, those of us who follow the rules don't get to decide when it's convenient to tally up. It's a yearly requirement. And cheshbon hanefesh is not only a personal accounting, but also a cheshbono shel olam, an accounting of the world. It requires us to ask not only, who have I been this past year, and is that the person I want to be moving forward, but also, what kind of world am I living in? And do I want that world to be the one my children and grandchildren inherit? The practice of cheshbon hanefesh demands that we take a deep and sincere look at our personal and collective realities and work to not only remove what does not belong, but also add that which might be missing. It challenges us to make positive and sustainable changes, those that will improve our lives and the lives of those around us. This work is always challenging. We know that. But I believe that it carries significant weight on this Yom Kippur, because these past few years have been unimaginable for many of us. Pandemic, political turmoil, racial reckoning, climate disaster. I know that for me, in the midst of these extremely turbulent waters, it was often enough just to stay afloat, to prevent spiritual bankruptcy in a time of extreme loneliness and pain. It was enough to maintain connection despite distance and Zoom fatigue, to remain informed amidst boundless misinformation. Sometimes it was enough just to get out of bed in the morning. And now, 2+ years later, when so many of us are able to be physically present in our beautiful prayer space, to have those around us that make us feel whole, now that we have the capacity to once again invest in the issues confronting our planet's future, to work towards democracy and justice in our country, we are forced to ask an additional question. What is enough now? Are we still taking a cheshbon, an account, with the sole purpose of remaining afloat? Or, as we emerge from our collective isolation and re-enter the world in year 5783, might we once again have the capacity to swim? This afternoon, we will read the biblical book of Jonah, a prophet who finds himself adrift in very literal, turbulent waters. The book begins, and the word of Adonai came to Jonah, son of Amittai, Kum lech el Ninveh ha'ir hagadolah, get up and go to the great city of Nineveh, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me. This is a fairly straightforward instruction. The Ninevites have acted sinfully, and God tells Jonah to travel to their land and address them, to remind them that they can be so much better than they have been, that there is no limit to how truly, deeply good they can become. But that is not what Jonah does. Instead, our reluctant prophet jumps on a boat and travels towards Tarshish, the exact opposite direction. Disappointed, even angry, God causes a huge storm to surround the boat, threatening to sink it. And as the sailors are scrambling about the deck, Jonah does what many of us do when things are frightening or unexpected. He tunes it out. He goes below deck into the bowels of the boat, and he takes a nap. The captain of the ship comes down and demands that Jonah do something to save them. Kum kara el Elohecha, get up and call to your God. Perhaps this God will be kind to us and we will not perish. And Jonah, knowing that his abdication of responsibility is the cause of this storm, replies, heave me overboard, and the sea will calm down for you. For I know that this great storm came upon you because of me. With this request, Jonah is choosing death over facing God and completing the task that God has given him. And the sailors comply, heaving Jonah up over the side of the boat and sending him plummeting into the depths of the sea. Now, as you know, while Jonah descends, he is swallowed by a big fish. Not a whale, contrary to popular belief, but a big fish. And he remains inside that fish for 3 days. 3 days is a very long time to be trapped in the cold, dark belly of a fish. And as Jonah sits in that belly, he begins to think, perhaps about how he got into this predicament, but also about his life and his commitments, who he is and who he wants to be. And our reluctant prophet begins to pray. Into the depths you cast me, he prays, into the heart of the sea, and the floods engulfed me. And I thought to myself, I was banished from before your eyes. I descended to the lowest point of the mountains. The gates of the earth closed upon me forever. Yet you, Adonai my God, raised up my life from the pit. After 3 long days, God commands the fish to spit Jonah out upon dry land, and what is the first thing God says to him? Kum lech el Ninveh ha'ir hagadolah. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. 3 times in the book of Jonah is our prophet instructed to kum, get up. Twice by God, and once by the captain as his boat struggles to stay above water. In each of these situations, Jonah is asked to perform a task, something he very much does not want or feel he has the capacity to do. And while he tries desperately to run away, to Tarshish, to the bowels of the boat, even to the depths of the sea, he's not able to escape his commitments, his responsibilities. This isn't a test of Jonah's loyalty. Surely, if it was, our prophet would have failed, for he repeatedly goes against God's explicit instructions. And God isn't looking for perfection. God simply wants Jonah to see himself as capable of the job God has set out for him, certainly, but also of doing and being more than he has been in the past, of caring more deeply, and of helping to make the world a better place to live for himself, for the Ninevites, and for all human beings. So even when Jonah descends to the lowest point in the sea and the gates of the earth close upon him, God is there to lift him up, to remind him that despite his reluctance, there is work to do, the endless yet sacred work that comes with being fully human. Sometimes, when we are at our lowest, it's helpful to be told, "Kum, get up and keep moving." When a mourner has reached the end of Shiva, the week of mourning following the burial of a loved one, it is customary for those closest to that mourner to say, "Kum, get up," before walking them around the block and reintroducing them to the world. This practice is often accompanied by a passage from the book of Genesis in which God says to Abram, "Kum hitalech ba'eretz," get up, walk about the earth through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you. Of course, this is not said because those who are in mourning have forgotten how to stand or walk. Rather, it reminds the mourner that they are still a part of this world, and that within them lives the spark of the divine, and with it, almost limitless potential, that with the support of their community and loved ones, they can and will move forward. It's not a command, but an invitation to continue on the painful, tiring, beautiful journey we call life. Many of us have spent the last 2+ years not knowing when or how our broken world will be put back together. And during that collective trauma, we may have found it necessary, for the sake of our health or our sanity, to focus inward and tune out the world. But on this Yom Kippur, as we begin to reemerge and look out at that still broken world, we must ask, will we remain below deck, away from the storm, away from the pain, away from the work? Is that really enough for us? Is it really enough for us now? Or will we, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, demand a little more of ourselves? Award-winning author Dr. Erica Brown writes, "Many experiences in life try to break us. Illness, loneliness, the death of loved ones, insecurity, loss. But such experiences also make us more whole as human beings. They expand our range of consciousness and compassion. They enlarge our capacity for inclusion. They make us stronger and help us reach out to others with greater empathy and concern. When we acknowledge that we are broken, we enter a universe where we are not measured by our perfection, but by our willingness to repair ourselves and the world. Ein li mivchan bishvilchem, I do not have a test for you. And the perfect amount of introspection and repentance will not warrant a passing grade for another year on this earth. Aval hacheshbon, but the bill we have racked up over this past few years, both personally and collectively, Kan, is right here. Yom Kippur is our moment for spiritual self-examination, a day on which we look at the account of our past and commit to budgeting our social and spiritual capital differently in the future. It is not a command, but a loving and hopeful invitation. Kum, to get up. Kum, to engage in the work. Kum, to make our world one that our children and grandchildren and that we ourselves can be proud of. It won't be perfect. We know that, because perfect isn't what we're going for. It isn't what Judaism or God asks for. All we can do is our best to be a little kinder, a little more generous, a little more engaged than we've been in the past, and to maintain compassion for ourselves as we fail time and time again. Because we are all still a part of this broken world, and there is important work yet to be done. Gemar Tov.